First thing, thank you, Paavo, to have organized this from the Finnish side, and thank you, Tuomo, to have, you know, instigated this meeting. I would say, yeah, in terms of a dialogue between different people on ideas of cosmology. My side is not the cosmological side. I come from the more quantum mechanical side. I worked a lot with Basil Hiley, who passed away 4 months ago now. And so my take is, you know, and which was always Basil's interest, and Paavo will confirm this, his interest of trying to bring in together gravity and quantum mechanics, but in maybe not in a manner that was done in general in kind of standard approach, and very much more on the geometrical approach, the mathematical, algebraic, geometrical understanding of what's happening in quantum mechanics, and then therefore maybe linking that possibly to gravity. But that's a process, and some people here will speak about that, and we'll have several talks concerning that. But the main kind of idea is to talk about Tuomo's work and proposition of the dynamical universe. But I think I'm right in saying the whole philosophy here is a dialogue, and Paavo will talk about Bohm's idea of dialogue, that we always kind of, you know, we don't sit on the physics that we know, we try and take from others any input, any kind of ideas, and open our minds, and maybe we don't take that further, but at least we've seen other ideas, and this is what the whole exercise is about. And also several people who sometimes even here at UCL, we're in the same college, but we don't meet, we don't dialogue, you know, a little bit by accident, and also because, you know, you don't have the time, to be totally honest. Here it allows us to have this kind of dialogue in a more relaxed manner. Right, I'm going to give over to Paavo.
Thank you, Peter, so much for really making this possible. And well, I say maybe just a little bit about myself. I mean, for me, this kind of connection started actually in 1980 when I first met David Bohm. This was more in the context of consciousness and Krishnamurti and those kinds of things. But then my interests moved also to philosophy of physics, and so I was interacting quite a lot with the Bohm from maybe 85 till 92 at Birkbeck, but you know, elsewhere as well. And 91, Bohm introduced me to Basil. And, you know, as David Bohm died in 92, but then Basil and I worked together 30 years until January. And Basil actually was also, we were discussing this workshop in December. That was the last call I had with Basil. And so, you know, and he said to me, "You better be quick," referring to that he's not a young boy anymore. And, but anyway, so I wasn't quick enough, but I'm sure he would be very happy that we keep on the work and the discussions. And so anyway, I mean, maybe a little bit about the dialogue. You see, this is something that David Bohm, of course, he had this very strong social conscience, which got him actually into a bit of a trouble in the McCarthy era in the States, but we don't go there. But so he was always trying to solve not only the problems in physics, but pretty much everything else as well, including, you know, problems of society and human consciousness, and so. And I think he kind of explored these 20 years with Krishnamurti, where there's very much the idea of change of consciousness. But I guess he began to feel that this approach is not sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. So we also need to have a more social, collective solution in terms of communication. And then he started working on this, what he called it's actually not called the Bohm dialogue. If you go to I actually have a link to that in the workshop homepage explaining what that is. But I guess I think he got the inspiration for dialogue. Partly it was everything he was doing with consciousness on the individual basis. But also there was this psychotherapist Patrick Demare in London who did group therapy. But Demare was saying, well, this is actually sociotherapy. It's not only for the individual, it's for the entire society. So Bohm got very excited about that and did many large group experiments where I was taking part in many of those. And some of these have been published. I mean, there are book on dialogue, this book called Thought as a System, which is quite interesting. And you see, and well, you see, I won't go into it too much, but the basic idea of dialogue is if you think of the root of the word dia and logos. So dia means true, logos is meaning. So the idea is that the meaning, as it were, goes through the group. Whereas discussion is more like concussion, where we sort of fight with each other. And so the main, I guess the simple idea of dialogue is that one is trying to listen to what the different viewpoints mean, sort of suspending, looking at them and not immediately sort of judging. And that sounds trivial and simple, but it's actually very difficult to do. And so in a way I would say that the primary, in some ways like for a workshop like this, our primary aim might be to understand the meaning of the different viewpoints. I mean, we will maybe be able to judge them as well, but sometimes we throw the baby out even before putting it into the bathwater, so to speak. So the idea is really to engage into these topics. And I think in terms of physics, I'm a philosopher, so physics for me is a serious hobby. But still, experience teaches that the issues are very complicated. I mean, I've been kind of focusing on the philosophy of quantum mechanics with Basil and others. And of course, people who know that, that there are all these different interpretations, and it's not easy to settle between them experimentally. So, sometimes it feels that, somebody likes the many worlds, somebody likes pilot waves, somebody likes spontaneous collapse. No, I want to be a cubist. No, Niels Bohr had it. It's like, sometimes it may feel that, it's the game with no rules and consequences, as Colin McQueen said about something else. Anyway, so, but even there, so the point is just that it doesn't help there to adopt one of the interpretations and just be very, not listen to anybody else. Bohm himself felt that given that experimentally we can choose the interpretation of quantum mechanics, why not try to understand each one of them and, in their own merits, and then also maybe see what their strengths and weaknesses are. And, maybe even sort of suspend judgment, which is correct. I think he had this Hegelian dialectic idea there that if you're able to do that, maybe something will emerge at the higher, like synthesis at the higher level. And so I think that was one strategy. And now with relativity, I did study actually relativity. I did my undergraduate in physics, but that was in the 80s, it was a long time ago. But I like, for example, I recently read David Wallace's nice little book about philosophy of physics, where he tells us that even in relativity there's the dynamic and kinematic, if I remember correctly. I mean, there are different interpretations. So the meaning is even there. If you start asking ontological questions, there are these different approaches. And I think in the case of Tuomo's approach, which I've begun studying, but it's not. It's for me constantly trying to sort of understand it. It's again that there are certain phenomena, and then there are different ways of thinking about them. And I guess the challenge here is we are going to have very different models. I mean, there's a so-called mainstream view, which is something that we have, each one may, at different degrees, may have adopted. And of course, then what Tuomo is doing has certain different assumptions. So I think this is exactly the place for the dialogue, in the sense that can I jump from one way of thinking to another way of thinking, and then just can we engage in this kind of thing? And but other than that, I don't think I need to say much more. We might at some stage, I mean, if we think of this also as an experiment in dialogue from time to time, I mean, if we'll see what happens. Maybe at some stage I might interfere a little bit, like say, well, let's see, do we have here some sort of interesting, what's going on if we, come up to some sort of disagreement. But the idea is not so much to trying to direct or govern any this kind. It's perhaps more also just to learn about the process itself, and of course, you see, the other thing is, of course, that we'll see what happens. I mean, there's of course possibility we could keep going with this, and there might be. I think for many of us, Basil was really the driving force of this cooperation, and I think the fact that he's no longer with us, I think we're left a little bit like without orientation, and really, like Basil was my main contact here as well. And I think somehow I'm hoping that maybe in this workshop, who knows, we might find some new ways of cooperation and perhaps even funding possibilities for some people who are here want to do research. So, but anyway, I think that would be probably enough about that.